Welcome to The Interview. Is the advisor hiding behind Hillary Clinton's 21st century statecraft? At only 39 years old, is reshaping diplomacy and adding it an E before the name. Is a very skilled diplomat, but can he prove himself as a geek? Alec Ross, thanks for being with us today. I can't open this show without asking you a question about Steve Jobs. You met him a couple of times. From your perspective, what is Apple's guru's legacy?
Well, I think that people use the word visionary and rebel a lot, but Steve was legitimately a rebel visionary. My favorite expression of his was, "It's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy." He was not a follower, he was a doer, and he saw the world through two eyes entirely of his own. So I think his legacy was a legacy of nonconformity and not seeing things as they are, but as they should be.
You're working on innovation for the State Department, and you've been establishing a brand new name for this kind of diplomacy. It's called the 21st century statecraft. What is actually the 21st century statecraft?
Yeah, if you think about diplomacy, diplomacy historically, for hundreds of years, has been practiced by men in white shirts with red ties, in pinstripe suits, drinking cups of tea on across from a mahogany table with a flag flying in the background, determining what the relationships between our governments should be. 21st century statecraft says that that kind of formal diplomacy still has a place, but in the 21st century there are new technologies, there are new demographics, and there are new networks out there that we should use to make diplomacy more open and to engage not just the elites, but broader segments of society.
So would you say that the 21st century statecraft is Google's statecraft?
You know, I think that people focus a lot on three companies: Google, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Facebook, Twitter. But honestly, a lot, and sure, we work with Google, we work with Facebook, and we work with Twitter. But honestly, a lot of this is about bringing the startup culture to diplomacy. So lots of companies that you've never heard of. The 25-year-old coding, hacking, doing really interesting things online. So sure, it engages America's technology sector, the big companies, but more often than not, it really brings a startup mentality, the working in a basement mentality to diplomacy.
Media also really focused on Facebook during the Arab Spring, calling it a Facebook revolution. Looking back at what happened in Egypt, I can remember Vice President Biden still not saying that Hosni Mubarak was a dictator until actually bloggers and activists took Tahrir Square. So my follow-up question would be, do you think that e-diplomacy, the only tool that State Department and the U.S. at large can bring to the table when they can succeed with, formal diplomacy?
Well, I think that you can never forget formal diplomacy. At the end of the day, the State Department's best asset are our diplomats. The best thing we have is Hillary Clinton leading and engaging as an interlocutor, meeting with statesmen like Alain Juppé and others. But what e-diplomacy does is it expands the engagement. So what I say is, this isn't just a way of talking to people. Remember, you only have one mouth, but you have two ears. So the opportunity with social media and this form of diplomacy is to be able to hear people in Tahrir Square, people who you may not be sitting with at a diplomatic table, in a conference room, in an embassy. This is a way of not just talking, but listening and learning as well. And
to what extent this engagement was taken on the ground during the Arab Spring? How the State Department actually helped bloggers and activists on the ground? Yeah, so we believe that there are certain universal rights. Hillary Clinton is our 67th Secretary of State. Our first Secretary of State was a former ambassador to France, Thomas Jefferson. And he said, the only legitimate foundation for government is the will of its people, and to preserve its free expression should be our first order. So from the 18th century, when Thomas Jefferson was our first Secretary of State,
to today, we have these same values. Now, if you believe in the freedom of the press, if you believe in the freedom of speech, if you believe those things in the year 2011, you have to protect and preserve it on the internet. So when bloggers and digital activists and others are using these tools in Syria, in Egypt, in Tunisia, in these other countries, what we have to do is give them tools to be able to exercise their universal values and stay safe while they're doing it.
One of those concrete tools might be an internet suitcase that State Department is actually preparing for bloggers and activists on the ground. How far is this project going, actually? How far is it developed?
Yeah, I'm not going to share any classified information here
Really?
on TV. Sorry, no big scoop. But what I will say is that that is one of a great many projects that we're supporting that are working. What we believe is that if a government seeks to turn off the internet, flip the switch, no mobile phones working, no internet working, America has great technologists. We have great innovators. And what we believe is that a government doesn't really have the right, or it's wrong, to turn off the internet. So we're supporting the development of technologies like this internet in a suitcase to be able to do that. I think they've named themselves Commotion, which seems appropriate.
But, I mean, concretely, how are you going to let them bypass the kind of dictatorship, just, cutting the internet?
Yeah, so part of it is helping them financially, first of all. Develop the tools to work around government censorship. A lot of the time the real experts aren't government. They are people in computer science departments at our universities. They are people at NGOs. They are the activists themselves. And so I think it's important sometimes for government to recognize that sometimes the best thing it can do is help them with political information, political intelligence, and money. And so in this case, what we're doing is we're supporting a group of brilliant technologists to develop technologies that will allow people around the world to exercise the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press.
Do you think that the Arab Spring actually started 2 years ago in Tehran?
That's a great question. I think that much of what happened in Tehran in June of 2009 set the precedent for what would then happen in Tunisia in December of 2010. And I think people overlook it a little bit, overlook it too much. In fact, if you want to know how students, for example, in Cairo learned not to feel the effects of tear gas, it's because students in Tehran were communicating with them over the internet to say, hey, if you put an onion in your coffee, the tear gas won't get in your eyes because the onion will absorb the tear gas. So what's interesting to me is to see how activists in North Africa, in Syria, have learned from what worked and what didn't work in Tehran.
Another big affair that came up this year is the WikiLeaks one. Is State Department still recovering from Cablegate?
Here's the big headline from WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks revealed massive right-doing by American diplomats. I think that what WikiLeaks demonstrated is that our diplomats are very good at their job, that what we are doing privately is what we say we're doing publicly. So I don't think that there's much to recover from. I think the United States has nothing but pride in the work that our diplomats have done, and I don't think there's anything that's been revealed that should contradict that.
As a conclusion, I would like to ask you what you really used to do on Twitter, actually, is quoting what happened on this day. So what happened on the word story this day?
What happened?
On the word story this day. What happened on this day?
On this day? I don't know yet. I actually spent some time doing a little bit of research before I publish on these things. What I will say is yesterday is the first ever TV broadcast by first ever live TV broadcast by a president. So on this day in 1947, Harry Truman used TV as a way of getting Americans to conserve food because there was a lot of hunger in Europe after the Second World War in 1947. So this is a case, people think oftentimes I'm an engineer, I'm a geek. I was actually a history major. And so this is a way for me to bring a little bit of history to today through Twitter.
Just to conclude, you're here in Paris today because you're meeting a lot of your colleagues, I mean French colleagues also working on those kind of statecraft. Do you want to bring the word a brand new smile at what diplomacy can be by linking French people, by linking 20 people working in 20 different countries on e-diplomacy? What is your goal here?
So one of the things Barack Obama has done is he wants us to not be cowboy diplomats, where it's always the United States running way in front of everybody else and everybody following. He believes in multilateralism. He believes in real partnership. And so what I'm doing in Paris is 21 countries from every continent on Earth other than Antarctica came to Paris so that we could all spend a very intensive day-long seminar on 21st century statecraft. Because there are a lot of things that we can learn from each other and that we can do together. And one thing that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton want is for the United States to be doing things by themselves, but to do things more in a spirit of partnership and cooperation.
Many thanks for having, talk with us and discuss what is really state and also e-diplomacy statecraft. You can follow, obviously, Alec on his Twitter account, that is Alec G. Ross, and we're really proud to be, part of this Twitter diplomacy now. Many thanks, Alec. Stay with us, stay tuned for more news on France 24.